Hare Krishna, we are here with Mahatma Prabhu and we're going to be discussing some interesting topics on relationships and on life in general.
I was thinking, on the way here, we have a problem. The problem is, you have certain ways the Shastra describes the duties of a man and woman. And if the woman does the duty but the man doesn't, or the man does and the woman doesn't, it doesn't work. Because the context is of you doing your duty is your husband also does it, or vice versa. So sometimes we're told, well, if your husband doesn't do it, you do it, and he'll change, which is sometimes true. But sometimes it works the opposite way, and he gets empowered not to change and be more of what he is, in the sense of not doing his duty. So then it becomes a problem. So then, you have this scenario, oh, my husband is this and that, and then we say, no, but you should tolerate it because he'll change. But sometimes it gets worse when you tolerate it, because you empower him. So, we have this ideal, you should be this way, but sometimes when you're that way, if the husband isn't qualified, then it's actually empowering him to be bad by being tolerant. You agree?
Yeah. At the same time, I was thinking, isn't it like the other way around also, that when the Shastra says man's duty is this, women's duty is that, individually the person is supposed to focus on theirs? Because I usually see that the problem is the blame game. People usually, many people tend to say, he's not doing his part, or she's not doing her part. And therefore the focus always is pointing, how many? 3 fingers at, forget to point the fingers at ourselves, and we're always blaming other people. So I agree that that's right for many people. And I also think there are certain people that the other rule applies. So I think it's really what shoe size fits who, depending on their planetary placement. Yeah. There are some women who tend to depend too much on the man, and they say that I will do everything the man says, because anyway women are less intelligent, and they kind of go along with that mood for a long time, but because it's not maybe their nature, it tends to fall apart. Then later on I have seen many people, many friends, many clients that end up feeling victimized. What is your solution for this kind of situation where the mentality of a woman, what is the right thing?
So the challenge, it seems like the challenge is that you have a ideal, but you weren't trained for that ideal, and you're trying to jump into it all of a sudden. This is the ideal in Shastra, how the wife should be, or in the case of the husband, how he should be, and I want to follow that because I know it's the right thing and the best thing. So you're saying, so they follow it and they hit a point where they realize they can't, it's not their nature, it's artificial. And they become frustrated, and then what happens? They just forget the whole thing.
Yeah, it kind of, the whole thing changes.
Don't even try, and So that's not only in relationships, just in Krishna consciousness in general, we see that. Like someone is moving very fast, and they don't achieve what they want to achieve in a certain period of time. And sometimes they just give up the whole process. They give up the whole enterprise because they couldn't get what they wanted. So you could say it's a certain kind of mentality. Not that it's bad in the sense that you want to achieve perfection,
right.
but we have seen that people aren't realistic about what they can achieve and the speed they can achieve it, and they're maybe not realistic about who they are. And so you see a lot with older devotees who are still doing well, they've just confronted the reality of this is what is the ideal, and this is who I am, and this is what I think I can achieve in this life, and then it's very natural. And they just have to make peace with who they are. But the point that I always see, or say, is that in a marriage, the point is to become Krishna conscious, however you do it. So it's not, the goal isn't to become the quote-unquote ideal husband or wife, and then the marriage doesn't work because it's unnatural or it's artificial for both. So I think that has to be taken into consideration as the primary goal. Otherwise, it's like, okay, I became the perfect wife and I got divorced.
Exactly. Actually, isn't it like that?
Sometimes.
I'm trying to be the perfect wife, but I'm not going to be married anymore.
Yeah, you weren't. Yeah, I mean, some people we see, this is just what we see. Some people are Americans, but they're more Indian than the Indians. It's like, and then the Indians are more American than the Americans. So I have a friend, when he was 14, he taught himself Hindi. And then he studied Indian music, reading books in Hindi. So, and then, so he was obviously Indian. So for him, everything Indian is just so normal and so natural. And he lives in India now. He couldn't really function well in America. So if that's the case, a woman should just love everything about being that ideal wife and being extremely tolerant with the husband and so forth, which is what the Shastra says. But if that's not her nature or aptitude, it can really be problematic for her if she's not able to do it. So she's got to just kind of accept, these are my samskars, this is what I have to work with, but the goal is to make the marriage work. But the husband has to understand that also. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if he demands a certain standard from her that's unnatural for her, then that's also another reason why you get that flipping, because she'll try to do it, and she'll try and try and try, and she'll suppress the fact that it's not real and natural. Yeah. So I think it's extremely important to always understand, well, what's the point of being married in the first place? Mm-hmm. To come together to advance spiritually. Because it's just like if you want to be a brahmachari or a vanaprastha sannyas, the ultimate goal is to move you towards Krishna, not to be in and of itself the ideal sannyasi or the ideal brahmachari. That's great, but it may not always in and of itself make you Krishna conscious. You're doing all kinds of tapasya and so on, but maybe you're neglecting certain aspects of bhakti that are really important and replacing it with some austerity. So you're an austere brahmachari, but you've neglected something in bhakti. What's the point?
You mentioned earlier about the nature, understanding what we can handle, and then you also mentioned about the duties of husband and wife. So how do you see bhakti as the main goal, but how do we apply this nature and duties in a favorable way? How can we do that to avoid the suppression or avoid artificial show-off of something we are not?
I think part of the problem might be that one of the spouses is pushing the husband or wife to be something that they can't be. And then you naturally want to please your spouse, so that you'll push yourself. And if the spouse doesn't understand that, then the spouse can cause the problem out of their expectation. And I need you to be this way. And acceptance of the nature of people is one of the foundations of relationships. So I want you to be a certain way, and I'm pushing, and you're really trying. But inside, you know you can't do it, but you continue because you see that this is what I want. And it can become unhealthy for you because I have an expectation, or vice versa, you have an expectation for me that's unnatural. I know with my wife, she knows her limitations, and it's not that she rationalizes them, but it's just realistic. This is what I am, this is my nature, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And so we have to accept that.
And that helps in the long run.
Yeah.
And what would be your advice to those who are not yet married? How should they approach their life, their relationships, in order to have a successful and fulfilling relationship once they get into married life?
Well, it's good to know something that may disappoint you, but the nature of your relationships with other people will tend to be similar to your relationship with your spouse. There's a saying, as you do anything is how you do everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. So we have seen that sometimes devotees who have difficulty with relationships, with other devotees, with authority figures, end up having difficulty in relationship with their own gurus.
That's true.
So automatically we can understand there's going to be problems with their spouse. They don't like being told what to do. They're very, whatever it may be, the characteristics that make it difficult. And then those kinds of people will generally blame it on their spouse, the relationship problems are their spouse's fault. When they don't see, you say, wait a minute, you say it's your spouse's fault, but wherever you go, you've left a trail of bad relationships. And so like, hello, don't you see that you've got expectations or demands or there's things about you that you need to work on and improve.